Hello, and thank you for joining us on the Capitol Report. I'm your host, Steve Lance. Here's a look at some of the stories we have coming up for you today. U.S. officials will not attend the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics. This announcement comes just 60 days before the opening ceremonies. The Biden administration has ordered a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics. This is in light of the Chinese Communist Party's ongoing genocide against people of faith. We speak to former United States Ambassador for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback, to find out if there is anything else that can be done to hold the CCP accountable. And Russia's presence along the Ukraine border is building, and President Biden warned Putin of sanctions if Russia invades Ukraine. Congress is setting aside $300 million in the national defense budget to support Ukraine's military. And with this tension between Russia and Ukraine rising, Congress this week took action to support Ukraine's military, setting aside millions in the national defense bill. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more on this. So Melina, what can you tell us about this national defense bill and where is it heading?
Steve, this national defense bill is a must-pass bill. It's an annual bill that funds the Pentagon and U.S. military priorities. Now, like you mentioned, this bill does include around $300 million to support Ukraine's army. Some other key parts of this bill, it would provide a pay increase for U.S. troops, as well as scrapping a proposal that would have drafted women into the military. So that proposal is now scrapped from this year's defense bill. And this bill is $20 million more than what President Biden had originally proposed for the national defense bill. And of course, this has upset some progressives who generally want less money being dedicated to the military. But despite that pushback from the far left and the far right and members in Congress, it still passed the House last night with overwhelming bipartisan support. Now, another key part of this bill is it provides President Biden a framework for countering China. That is its strategy for handling China's presence in the Indo-Pacific, as well as making the Defense Department less reliant on China for products. Steve?
And Melina, this defense bill was held up in the Senate because Senator Marco Rubio wanted to attach China legislation. Specifically, he wanted to combat forced labor by banning imports from the Xinjiang region. So Melina, does it look like Congress is on track to take action against China's human rights violations?
Steve, as it's looking right now, the House is on track to pass this China human rights legislation. And what it is it's a package of bills to combat human rights in China. One of them would try to put an end to the forced labor of Uyghurs in China. Another piece of the bill also acknowledges that the International Olympic Committee has failed to live up to its human rights pledges through allowing Beijing to host these Winter Olympics. And the last piece would condemn the ongoing genocide and what it refers to as China's crimes against humanity being committed right now with its ongoing persecutions against people of faith and religious and ethnic minorities. It also calls on President Biden to actually take further action to put an end to those atrocities. Speaker Pelosi today told us why this piece of legislation on human rights is important.
The People's Republic of China is waging a brutal campaign of repression against the Uyghur people and other minorities with mass incarceration, torture, and forced labor. We talked about it last week. And again, if we don't speak up because we have an economic interest, we lose all moral authority.
Melina, and another pressing deadline right now in Congress is the debt ceiling. If lawmakers don't raise the debt limit by mid-December, the nation could default on its debt, causing an economic catastrophe. How is this developing right now?
Steve, that debt ceiling deadline is looking like it's less of a problem for Congress now. The House last night passed a kind of a method that would allow for Senate Democrats to raise the debt ceiling on their own with a simple majority vote. Now, but they'd have to specify by how much they want to raise the debt by. And right now, that number's looking somewhere more than $30 trillion. Now, another pressing deadline is Senate Leader Schumer's self-imposed and ambitious deadline to pass Biden's Build Back Better bill. That is the social welfare and climate spending bill before Christmas. So we'll just have to see if he can actually get this done. Steve?
Thanks for that, Melina. The Biden administration announced that U.S. officials will not be attending the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, citing China's human rights atrocities. This comes just 60 days before the opening ceremonies.
The Biden administration will not send any diplomatic or official representation to the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics and Paralympic Games, given the PRC's ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity in Xinjiang and other human rights abuses.
Psaki said that the administration will fully support the athletes on Team USA, but that they will not be contributing to the fanfare of the Games. Psaki emphasized that the U.S. has a fundamental commitment to promoting human rights. The White House announcement doesn't come as a surprise to other U.S. allies who are also considering the same measure. Russian President Vladimir Putin is the only leader of a major country who has accepted China's invitation to attend the Beijing Winter Olympics. Michael McCaul, Republican leader of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, has said that President Biden's diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics is not enough. McCaul signaled the need to protect free speech and called out China's use of the Olympics as a propaganda tool. McCaul says the Olympics are a key opportunity for the CCP to normalize their human rights atrocities, including genocide. And he went on to say that the free world needs to come together to reject this effort. Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan applauded President Biden's move to hold China accountable, but he also tweeted that China was not deserving of the Olympics because of human rights and for stonewalling the WHO's investigation into the origins of the COVID-19 epidemic. In response to the boycott, Beijing has warned that the U.S. will pay a price. CCP Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian told reporters to stay tuned. Ambassador Sam Brownback was the U.S. ambassador at large for international religious freedom, and because of his work, he is thoroughly familiar with the crimes against humanity committed by the CCP. The ambassador weighed in on the Beijing Olympics. Here's a look. Ambassador Sam Brownback, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Happy to do it. Glad to join you.
Now, Ambassador, I want to ask you about the Biden administration's recent announcement that they're going to impose a diplomatic boycott on the Beijing Olympics. Do you support this, and do you think it's enough? Could there be more that could be done? Where do you stand?
I support it. I hope there will be other countries, particularly the Brits, the Aussies, a number of allies of ours that will have this same thing. It's just not enough. We need to do more. I'm supporting an advertisers boycott, that the key advertisers of Western companies that are advertising, that are financing these Olympics and really trumpeting China in it, that if they don't get a firm date that the concentration camps for the Uyghurs are closed down, that they should pull all their advertising dollars. They should be very clear. They should use their financial strength with the Chinese government.
Now, a lot of these companies that do their advertising, whether it be Nike, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, even the media sponsor, the official sponsor, which is NBC Universal, they were very outspoken during the BLM movement, offering their support and doing different things. Do you think that they should potentially think about offering a similar type of support for the genocide to raise awareness and put the spotlight if in fact they do continue to go forward?
Absolutely. And if they don't, what hypocrisy. If you're willing to stand up for something here in this country, and you should, we need racial reconciliation in this country, but why can't you call out genocide by a group in China that's killing people right now and conducting it right now? I mean, I applaud the World Tennis Association for pulling their tournaments and standing up, and I'm calling on the NBA to stand up and don't just listen to dollars, listen to your heart. Listen to the human rights and the suffering of the people there and stand up for them. That's what these companies should be doing.
Now, one thing it feels like I'm hearing from you is that human rights, the issue of human rights, is a universal language. During your time, working as the ambassador for international religious freedom, did you feel as though this issue was a bipartisan issue where you could find common ground between Republicans and Democrats?
Yes. And it's not only that, it's a universal issue in that we would get all the different religions of the world, whether it's Christian or Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, Zoroastrian, all would stand for this, even though none of them agree on theology. It's not about a common theology, it's about a common human right. And that's what we need to stand for, is this common human right that people have to be able to practice their faith peacefully and freely. And China is in my estimation, the greatest threat to this human right in the world by what they're doing, what they're financing, and the technology they're now deploying. They are showing the future of oppression, and it's high-tech, it's a virtual police state, and we should stop it, and stop it now before it spreads further around the world.
Now, I want to ask you, what did you learn about China in terms of their human rights abuses?
China's at war with all faiths. It's the Falun Gong, it's the Christians, it's the house church people, it's every faith, it's the Buddhists that's being persecuted. They just can't stand as an atheist regime anybody having an allegiance to anything other than the state. But you know, as a free human being, my soul doesn't yearn to be connected with a government. It yearns to be connected to an almighty God that I can pursue freely myself. And that's what they're at war with, the Chinese Communist Party. It is a war they will not win.
Christians, Falun Gong practitioners, Tibetans, and Uyghurs are some of the religious groups who face torture and murder at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. Reverend Patrick Mahoney is a Christian who was arrested by CCP authorities during the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games for simply unfurling a banner on Tiananmen Square which read, "Jesus Christ is King." Here's a look at what Reverend Mahoney had to say about the 2022 Beijing Games. Reverend Patrick Mahoney, thank you so much for joining us in the Capitol Report.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
You made your way to Beijing in 2008 during the Winter Olympics. There was the Summer Olympics in Beijing, and you were eventually arrested there.
We were. So one of the things we looked at with the Beijing 2008 Summer Games was an opportunity to use a platform to the world to highlight the human rights abuses in China, to stress religious freedom, to speak out, of course, for Christians, but also Falun Gong practitioners, Tibetans. And so we thought this was a historic opportunity to do that. So we snuck into Tiananmen Square. It was like a Mission Impossible. We had it wrapped around our bodies, under all things, a banner which said Jesus Christ is King. We blocked the tomb to Mao Zedong. We unfurled the banner, and we were immediately arrested.
What was it like? Was it scary to you, or?
Well, we were definitely nervous. We prayed. You bring out a fantastic and excellent point that we found out. So they were called minders. They were dressed in tourist clothes. They looked like regular visitors, but they were actually members of the Chinese military. How do we know that? We were arrested by these people in Hawaiian shirts and shorts. Those same people, when we were taken to an army military installation, were then in their army uniforms. The exact same people who arrested us. So China wanted the world to know, oh, look, we're open, we're free, we allow.
Now, Reverend, the Biden administration has just recently announced that there will be a diplomatic boycott of the Olympics. This does not mean that the Olympics will not go on. It just means that people within the administration will not be attending. Do you think this is enough to send a message to China that their human rights atrocities won't be tolerated?
No, we don't, but I want to put a little parentheses there. It's a first step. But our position is this. The Biden administration said because of genocide in Xinjiang and crimes against humanity, we cannot send our diplomats to the Winter 2022 Olympic Games. Our position is this. If we can't send our diplomats to China, how can we possibly send our athletes? If the crimes and human rights abuses in China are so egregious that our diplomats are prohibited from attending, why would we allow our athletes to be used as a propaganda tool by the Chinese Communist Party and government to advance their agenda? So while it's a wonderful small step, what we would have liked, obviously, is for the International Olympic Committee never to have granted the games there. Now that that happened, we think it's disrespectful to our athletes and to human rights to put our Olympians in a position that we are not willing to put our politicians in. In other words, no, our politicians can't go because of human rights abuses and genocide. We respect our Olympic athletes. We want to honor our Olympic athletes. We want to honor the spirit of the Olympics. And what greater way would than giving our Olympians the opportunity to stand with Uyghurs, Christians, Hong Kongers who are being brutalized, Falun Gong practitioners, Tibetans, and to say we stand for human rights.
Reverend Patrick Mahoney, thank you.
God bless. Thank you.
And coming up, the Biden administration's COVID-19 vaccine mandate for federal contractors has been blocked nationwide by a federal court. And banking leaders from major U.S. banks are putting pressure on the Federal Reserve to control inflation. While forecasting inflation is a challenge, CEOs from major U.S. banks said to prepare for a period of inflation while encouraging the Fed to accelerate economic tapering. Welcome back. Federal court blocked President Biden's COVID-19 vaccine mandate for federal contractors on Tuesday. A U.S. district judge stopped the Biden administration from enforcing the mandate in any state across the country. This is an expansion of a November 30th ruling that applied to just 3 states. The Biden mandate was going to take effect on January 4th.
I'm a doctor, I am pro-vaccine, but I'm anti-mandate. And that's because I believe the mandate is a massive overreach by the government and a massive mistake. And at this point, clearly the courts are agreeing with what we're trying to do.
Courts had already barred other Biden administration mandates, including one for private businesses, as well as one for healthcare workers. President Biden had a 2-hour virtual meeting with Russian leader Vladimir Putin on Tuesday. Russia's escalating tension with Ukraine dominated the talks. Putin and Biden exchanged greetings ahead of the talk. During the meeting, Biden reiterated to Putin America's support for Ukraine's sovereignty. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says that if Russia were to further invade Ukraine, Biden and U.S. allies would respond with strong economic measures.
And we would fortify our NATO allies on the eastern flank with additional capabilities in response to such an escalation.
The Kremlin said before the meeting that it did not expect any breakthroughs and has denied harboring such intentions. And it also says that its troop posture along the border is defensive. Ukraine has long been wanting to join NATO, but Russia is warning against NATO expanding eastward. Democratic Congressman Dina Titus tells NTD she wants Biden to stand strong against Putin.
We don't want to go to war. We don't want to send troops over there on the border with Ukraine, but he's got to let him know he means business, and that may be business, may be economic sanctions.
The White House says Biden and Putin also talked about strategic stability, ransomware, as well as working together on regional issues such as Iran. And in that Build Back Better bill, immigration reform is a priority for the Democrats. The House-passed version of the bill would give work permits for millions of illegal immigrants and protect them from deportation. But it does stop short of a pathway to citizenship. This week, Democratic lawmakers joined protesters outside of the Capitol to urge the Senate to pave the pathway to citizenship at all costs.
So where we are at is that the Senate needs to step up, override the parliamentarian. Yes. Okay? The parliamentarian is not elected. Yes. It is not an elected position. And the parliamentarian has been overridden and dismissed in the past.
The Senate parliamentarian, Elizabeth McDonough, is the person who oversees Senate rules. She has twice turned down Democratic proposals to include immigration reform in the Build Back Better budget bill. This is because she says a pathway to citizenship is a policy issue and not a budget matter. But this group of activists and House Democrats are calling for senators to overrule the parliamentarians' advice and include a full pathway to citizenship in the final version of the bill.
How confident are you that the Senate will add that pathway to citizenship and it will come back to the House and pass?
Well, I think that that's something that's been discussed and vetted by the leadership on both sides in the House and in the Senate. There are no surprises here, so I'm optimistic that the vote there in the Senate to pass it.
U.S. bank executives raised concerns about the impact of a sustained period of high inflation at a Goldman Sachs conference on Tuesday. Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon said that moving forward, fiscal policy from Congress and the Fed will have a bigger impact on the trajectory of markets than the pandemic. Wells Fargo CEO Charlie Scharf said that the Federal Reserve may need to move more quickly to address inflation concerns by quickening its slowdown of asset purchases. Supply chain troubles are expected to intensify as China ramps up pandemic restrictions and installs a 7-week quarantine for crews returning to the country. Crew members on Chinese ships are now mandated to quarantine for up to 7 weeks in designated facilities. Vessels that have refreshed their crews elsewhere have to wait 2 weeks before being allowed to port in China. The resulting congestion of anchored ships is prolonging shipping delays and shortages of available containers. Large companies, including Ocean Network Express and Evergreen, have informed customers that they are suspending delivery of cargo destined for smaller ports. Several GOP lawmakers released a report on Tuesday highlighting what they call the unusually cruel treatment that January 6 detainees are receiving in the D.C. jail that they're being held in. They're demanding an end to what they say is a two-tiered justice system in America.
As members of Congress, we're calling on our colleagues to step up, and we have to bring this to an end. We need a good justice system, not one that persecutes people.
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene and 3 of her colleagues released the report. In early November, Representatives Greene and Gohmert got an opportunity to visit the January 6 detainees. They said that they were shocked at the conditions in the D.C. jail and the inhumane treatment that the detainees have been receiving, including solitary confinement and lack of medical treatment.
Pretrial confinement is not a place for punishment. That can only come after conviction. And yet here what we've seen in the D.C. jail amounts to a great deal of punishment.
Congressman Matt Gaetz said that what they are demanding is simply equal justice.
It's the January 6 detainees who are denied basic access to medical care and constitutional rights today. But tomorrow, it could be the school board parents. The day after that, the rest of us, all of you.
They called on House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to release all of the videos of Capitol Hill on January 6th so that people can know what really happened on that day. There are reports surfacing of agent provocateurs infiltrating the crowd and inciting the insurrection who were federal agents. They believe that complete transparency is the only way that the nation can heal. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden visited the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. on the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. Japan attacked the naval base in Hawaii on December 7, 1941. In a surprise attack, dive bombers, torpedoes, and suicide planes killed 2,400 people and wounded over 1,000. Those who survived did what they could to rescue others and fight back. The President and First Lady held a moment of silence in front of a wreath at the center of the memorial. The wreath included the state flower of Kansas in honor of the late Senator Bob Dole. The veteran died on Sunday and was seriously wounded during World War II. And that's all we have for you on the Capitol Report today. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Steve Lance, and we'll see you next time.